Hi, my name is Keith Cooper from Northlight Images. This video is about buying kit. What's best? What should you buy? Printers, cameras, lenses. That's a rather grand claim. And it's one of the reasons I mention it is that I often get emails asking me questions about buying stuff. Now, I don't mind that, and in fact I do welcome people emailing me with questions, because quite often it gives me ideas for videos, but it also helps me understand what people's issues are, what troubles they're having, and it makes it easier for me to try and produce stuff that's helpful for people. And I'm going to have a look at some printers, I'm going to have a look at some cameras, but not so much, and also a brief mention of some lenses. But the key message of this that I want to get across is that if you wait for everything, you get nothing. And I've seen this time and time again. People say, oh, I'd like such and such, but it doesn't do such and such, and therefore I'll wait. Now, it may be that by waiting you get something which fits your needs, but I'm going to suggest that most times I get asked questions like this, what turns up is similarly lacking in some way or other. So people may ask, what's the best printer? And my answer for this goes for lenses, cameras and everything else as well, is it depends. Because it really depends what you want it for, what you want to do, what your level of experience is, all sorts of things like this. And it's too easy sometimes to be swayed by, as it was on, photography forums and the like, and it can be now things like YouTube and other areas, that people go, oh, well, you should get such and such. This is the best for such and such. Everything has its limitations. And I'll come back to some of the kit I use here for my professional photography. Now, I'm a professional architectural industrial photographer. Don't do weddings, don't do things like that. So that colours immediately what sort of kit I find useful. So, for example, medium format. Would I consider this for sports? Well, probably not. Autofocus is not so good. But anyway, that's cameras. I'll come back to cameras. First of all, printers though. Above all, don't be unduly led by some of the myths of it. In particular, pigment inks are great. You need pigment inks to do proper printing. Yeah, pigment inks can be very good. They can certainly last longer. And by the way, if you're worried about archival properties, be realistic about it. Are you selling stuff to museums? Or are you just hoping for stuff that your relatives 2 or 3 generations down the line will go, oh, I'm glad he printed that on a pigment ink printer, because if he'd used a dye-based printer, it might be faded by now. No, they won't. Myself and Karen have lost parents in the last couple of years, and we've realised that, stuff that you may hope will be carried on and saved on through the family can very quickly become just sort of stuff that nobody wants. Now, I've saved a lot of my dad's pictures and things and that, but I had quite a big cull of their holiday photos because they were pictures of people I don't know in places I've never been to, and boxes and boxes of slides. Yeah, I kept a lot of stuff, but comes a point, it depends on all sorts of things, but you have to be realistic about this. I have no illusions that anyone is going to want this giant picture here in years to come or anything like that. This is going to be recycled or whatever. A bit of realism sometimes in what you think in terms of your requirements. So for printers, the pigment myth. The printer I have widely recommended to people, it's the first time I've ever recommended a printer as such, as the Epson ET-8550. And the reason I've recommended it is because it's cheap to run, and it helps people get into photography. Now, if you're not so worried about the running costs, the costs of ink, you think perhaps, and papers as well. And of course, the ink tank printers only save money on ink costs. They don't make your paper any cheaper. Then something like this, the Canon Pro 310, is pigment inks, excellent quality. Paper handling is more reliable than the 8550, handles a wider range of papers. but it has small ink cartridges, so you're going to cost more for that. Yes, it would be nice if Canon made a larger ink tank printer, but they don't. And this comes for the thing, oh, I think I'll wait for such and such. Well, I don't see any larger ink tank printers coming along anytime soon from Canon. This is around for a few years yet, and the Pro 200, and if you want something a bit bigger, the 1100. As I say, I happily recommend the 8550 to people who want to print certain types of photos. And I've had lots of people contact me and say, this is great, I've got back into printing. This has helped me get back into doing photography by printing my work. Now that is excellent. If that doesn't fit what you want, then look for something else. If you want to go for the higher end stuff, there are better printers. And in many ways, this is a better printer than the 8550. You'll get good deals on this, so cost-wise doesn't necessarily make much difference. It comes down to that thing about the cost of inks. And I know some people in printing have said to me, some of the companies, and they've said, oh, people don't worry about things like that. Oh, yes, they do. The perceived cost, the upfront cost of inks and things makes a lot of difference. Expensive inks discourage experimentation. You get good at printing by doing lots of printing. Yes, you can read about it, you can watch it, videos and the likes on it, but to really get good at printing your photographs and get all the benefits that I would say that brings to your photography, you actually need to do it. If you don't do it, or if you think, oh, I'll wait until I've got a really good picture until I print it, you don't get the practice, you don't. It's a virtuous circle. The more printing you do, the better things get. So, yes, I happily recommend the 8550. Would it be nice if it had pigment inks? Yes. Would it be nice if it had better paper handling so that it didn't have a propensity to mark some thicker art papers? Yes, that would be nice as well. But, waiting for everything, you get nothing. Waiting for that next better printer to come along, you don't get prints. You might say, well, I want prints that are, that are perfect. Well, personally, anytime someone uses the word perfect to describe something to me, that instantly raises a flag for me, because for me, perfection is a spurious illusion. There's no such thing. Go for good quality. You can get good quality from all sorts of printers. The 200, even the older 100, many people still use, although inks are starting to get a bit more difficult to find for that. The older 300 for this one here, that's fine still. So get what works, but get printing and get using stuff. Because just going through lists of specs and things and thinking, what might I buy, doesn't really get you anywhere on it. And that's a problem I come across a lot. And I try and produce stuff like this and my reviews and various other things to try and sort of, show what you can do if you really want to. Anyway, that's printers. And I've done loads of stuff on printers. But what about cameras? Well, once again, in many ways, the trade-offs are even more. I mean, I've got a couple of cameras here I use for my work. This is Canon R5. I got this one second-hand because why spend lots of money on an R5 Mark II when I can get this for I got a good deal on this. This works fine. I use it for some of my work. It's also RF mount, which means helps me for when I'm asked to do lens testing and things. But my more serious camera is this one, the GFX 100S. That's really nice. It's great. It's great for what I do. As I said, I wouldn't consider this for sports. I borrowed from Fujifilm the 500mm lens for this. A lovely lens to do it. But did I come away from that thinking, whoa, this is what I need for nature photography and sports? No, I didn't. For myself, the quality you get from this, that you can get from this, needs work. Just buying a better camera will not usually make much of a difference. Now, yes, if you can afford it, then things like this are interesting for certain types of photography. So yes, macro perhaps, but then do you really need a full frame sensor? Because there are not so many macro lenses available for it. Landscape, yes, that is certainly an area for this because it tends to be a slower thing. I mean, I like this one because the image stabilization on it lets me use it handheld still. I don't need to take a tripod with me all the time. So yeah, that medium format, yes, but there's an awful lot of nonsense talked about how special the look, etc. of medium format is. Ask people to define it. They never seem to be able to define it, with any reliability. I will go so far as to suggest that a significant portion of people who switch to medium format in a look for quality in that, and a significant number only do it because they can afford the stuff and they think it will be better. I do wonder to what extent photographs taken on cameras like this could, for what they end up being used for, just as easily be taken on this, an R5. Okay, this is a fairly high-end camera, but lower-end cameras as well. One of the reasons I got the Canon one here is because I've used Canon stuff for years. Now, I've for a long while used Canon 1 series cameras and was hoping that they were going to bring out a really high-resolution one, but they brought out a 5DS, 50 megapixels. Still a little bit more than this, but makes no real difference. This is in many ways better. I find this more useful now, particularly with an adapter on it to use. And in fact, it complements nicely the EOS RP that I still use for shooting these videos. But, nice kit like this. You could work cheaper like this. You don't need to spend much money on it. Same way it goes for Nikon stuff and Sony. Incidentally, just in case anyone from Sony has ever watches any of my videos, yeah, I'd love to test some Sony kit, but every time I've contacted them or anything like, or spoken to anyone, I've never had a reply. I'm not sure if I've offended somebody at Sony in the past, but your kit's good. I'd like to have a look at it. But I'm not buying a camera just to test for something like that. But that's just as an aside. But if I look at this, you need expertise to use any of these better cameras. It's the same way with big printers. You can just buy a top-end printer and launch straight into it. And yes, with a bit of practice, and you don't mind spending the money on it, you will do well. I would never recommend somebody buys a printer capable of printing stuff like this. Now, as it happens that I am tomorrow doing some testing of printers that can do prints this size. But anyway, that's some stuff which will appear in a video in due course. In general, just throwing money at stuff. Now, here's something that I know won't be very popular in some areas, but there are many cameras which are just people spending money. I mentioned that I reckon there's a significant number of people using GFX, Fuji medium format cameras, who really, for the uses they make of them, could do with a lot less. I'd say that goes even more once you get to the likes of Leica and Hasselblad. I'm not even go there, because they are excellent cameras. And for people who understand to use them and know how to use them and have the experience, then great. But even more than these, I think, they are examples of, oh, I can afford the best, I'll get the best, that must make my pictures better. Now, whatever. I have a great disdain for Brandism. People go, oh, well, you should do this. Which is why if somebody says, you should just get a Canon printer or just get a Nikon camera and it will be better. Anything that mentions something by brand, I'm automatically suspicious of. Always have been. Now, I use Apple Macs. I'm not overly enamoured with the company itself. I use them because they fit what I do. But any sort of fan type activity of it, I find myself deeply suspicious of. And the more expensive it is, and the more it is just waving brand in your face, I wonder, what sort of results do people get from this? Well, yeah, it's your money, you spend it as you will. I know what I think of it, how much I'd spend. But then I'm happy to spend money on lenses. So for the GFX here, I've got the 4500. Nice general purpose lens. And as it is quite heavy, and so once again people say, oh, we should move to medium format. Yeah, these things weigh a ton. 2 or 3 lenses and a camera body, that's a lot of kit to cart around. This is relatively lightweight, but so that's expensive stuff. One of the nice bits is in lenses these days is that there are more and more third-party lenses available, often manual focus ones. Now, I've long been a proponent of manual focus lenses. You have to think a bit more what you're doing. They're not auto everything. I rarely use autofocus, even on something like this. I don't use it because I use tilt shift lenses. So keep an eye out if you're looking for kit for cheap options that can let you get into stuff. So for this one here on the R5, I've got this. This is a Brighton Star 12mm that I looked at, RF mount, available for other mirrorless mounts as well. I've got the 9mm as well. 2 very good lenses, relatively cheap, but even though they're relatively cheap, capable of good results if you put the effort into learning how to use them. Likewise on this one here, on the GFX, I've got, this is the TT Artisan 17mm tilt shift. Now, yeah, I'm an architectural photographer, so I like tilt shift lenses. This one turns out to be very nice. Got some quite nice examples I've taken for testing for this one to see how it goes. A very good lens and exceedingly wide. But once again, like all wide angle lenses, you need a lot of practice to get it. It's dead easy to shove a super wide lens on something. And you'll appreciate that, I tend to go for wider lenses more than, longer lenses, but, it just takes a lot of work. So would I have been better off waiting for a Canon 12mm or a Canon 9mm because it'll have autofocus, etc.? Not really. How about waiting for a Fuji 17mm tilt shift? I think I might have a long wait on that. Now, I do, because I use it for work. This picture was taken with it. And this was taken on a Fuji as well. And it's pictures like this, because I do stuff like this in my work, that I'm happy to have a 100 megapixel sensor. Don't need it for a lot of the work, but when I do, makes a difference. So yeah, I've got the Fuji 30mm tilt shift. That's an expensive lens, but it's part of the business, so it works. But if you're getting stuff like this, say you want to get into tilt shift lenses, get some cheaper lenses to start with. Accept that they may not be everything you want. But I'm going to say that if you're new to stuff like this, getting lenses like this is much better for you to explore and understand how to use them than just immediately splurging out money on things. I have no problem with using cheap kit if it works. I use cheap kit sometimes in my work. Now I don't go around saying, oh, look how cheap kit I'm using. It has a job to do. It may not do everything I want, but the whole point is, as I said right at the start, if you wait for everything, you get nothing. Shot like this, if I can get a shot here that impresses a client with this lens, even with all its limitations of its mount and things like that, then that's great. The fact that it's, I can't remember what the price of this one was. It about $500, something like that? It's incredibly cheap for something that as good as this in terms of quality. So to go right back to it, yes, I won't actually recommend stuff because it always depends. Printers, 8550, unless you really want the pigment inks and the quality and stuff like that, and that matters to you, and to be honest, that you think the people who are going to be looking at your pictures are ever going to notice. One of these is very nice. Cameras, buy what works for you. Just ignore people who tell you, oh, you should have such and such because it's better. There are an awful lot of myths and associated nonsense in the land of photography. And yeah, anyway, I enjoy my job. And yeah, I've had it as a hobby for many years as well, but yeah, it's a job as well. If you've got any questions, please do just let me know. I'm a little bit more, if you've got specific questions, should I get X or Y? Just make sure you put some background in it as to why you want something, rather than is A better than B? Because I may well say it depends. Anyway, thanks for watching and bye.